a trip. I'm sure you will enjoy it.
After she was allegedly raped, Kathleen took the witness stand and recanted, that is, took back her rape testimony. That sent Gary Dotson to jail for a term of 25 to 50 years. I lied, she said. I wanted to cover up having sex with my boyfriend because I thought that I was pregnant. In her new book titled Forgive Me, Kathleen describes the details behind her ordeal. Now a born-again Christian, she says she's determined to set the record straight, to prove once and for all Dotson's innocence. To prosecutors, the media, the public, Kathleen's case remains a puzzle. Is she telling the truth now? Did she lie the first time? And more importantly, did our jury system fail the man accused in this case? I'm Buzz Luttrell, and this is People Are Talking. Kathleen Crowe-Webb's new book, Forgive Me, will simply, in my opinion, continue the controversy about whether she lied the first time, whether she's telling the truth now or whatever, because a lot of people speculate about why she wrote the book. And I'm going to do something I seldom do. I'm going to the audience right now because I think a lot... Kathleen, what's your assessment? Do people believe that you're telling the truth now?
I haven't talked to anybody who doesn't believe me.
Well, let's check the audience right here and find out. Here's a woman who said, 1979, after having been raped in 77, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that she picked a man out of a lineup and said, yes, this is the guy who raped me. Was she telling the truth then?
Oh, I believe her.
You've read the book?
Yes.
Yeah, you're one of two people in the audience who said you've read the book.
Yes. We're very
She
good
was
friends.
not telling the truth in 79?
No.
Okay. Over here? You followed the case?
Yes.
Did she tell the truth in 79?
No.
Let me ask in general. How many of you here believe that Kathleen Crowe-Webb is telling the truth now? Second time around. How many don't believe it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The reason I ask is because this is the kind of show where we can do a before and after poll. And I like to feel that this show has an effect on people. So we'll check after the show, Kathleen, and see how many minds we've changed. I hope you don't lose many, because most people out here do believe you. You're not shocked at all that so many people believe you.
And I think the more they see the evidence and what's involved, they believe that I'm telling the truth now.
If I were Gary Dotson, if you were Gary Dotson, any man here, Gary Dotson, let me ask this guy, would you be able to forgive Kathleen Crowe-Webb for what she did?
No. No.
Did you raise your hand? You didn't raise your hand when
I raised my hand when... Yeah, I believed her.
You believe her. But she's telling the truth now, that he didn't do it.
Right, right.
But you couldn't forgive her if you had been in jail, what, 6 years?
I wouldn't be able to, no.
Let me ask you, to the best of your knowledge, how Gary feels about you today.
It's really amazing. He does forgive me. There's no animosity. There's no vindictiveness. It's incredible.
The title of your book, Forgive Me, and to me the picture says it all. You look remorseful, frustrated. You said angry because the picture was taken at a specific time after the judge rejected your recantation. But the title of the book, Forgive Me, is aimed at who? The public now? Gary has forgiven you.
It's aimed at Gary. It's aimed, I had to say that to the Lord when I got saved, and I had to say it to him again when I had to confess the sin. And now I think that's encompasses the whole book.
The people who don't believe you, I think, who don't believe that you're telling the truth, tend to look at the book and say, this is further proof. Big story, she's become a big-time celebrity, and now she's going to make a bundle on this book. Anybody here got that kind of concern? You don't care? You don't care about the book?
No.
You think she should write the book?
If she wants to,
should have
yes.
written the book?
Yes.
To tell her side of the story?
If she wants to, yes.
Yeah.
That's her privilege.
Nobody here is bothered by the notion that she might make a bundle of money off this book? Who said that?
I am, because if she's so religious, then I think that she did what she wanted to do by announcing it to the world, and let it go at that. Why make money on it?
You know, I gotta admit
that?
something. Yeah.
Could I answer
Well,
that?
I gotta confess to her. I roped you into this.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
How'd you
Because
rope
I
me?
know where the money's going. I just wanted to make the point.
Well-
Kathleen, where's the money going?
It's going to Gary. And to further that, one of the main reasons the book is written, in addition to giving financial restitution to Gary, is that he's not free. All he is out of jail. He's still a convicted felon. And that book gives in-depth into the testimony and the evidence and all the facts that people need to know to see that, you know, when they look at Gary, say he's an innocent man. That's what he wants.
Why didn't the governor of Illinois buy that? The Governor Thompson said, I'll pardon this man, but I don't believe he's innocent. I believe he did it. I believe she told the truth the first time. didn't he?
Mm-hmm. I think if he did that, the state of Illinois would be open to millions and millions of dollars worth of lawsuits.
The criminal
And they don't want
justice
that.
system and the chief executive of the state of Illinois are, in effect, participating in a cover-up?
Well, you know, when you listen to Governor Thompson after the clemency hearing, Governor said, I'm not saying she's lying, I just don't know what happened. So he can't even say I committed perjury in 1985. He's not willing to do that either.
He said that, huh?
He said that.
The quote that I read, that I recall, was to the effect that I think she told the truth the first time, which would make you, indirectly, a liar, at least in the governor's view, and that he would pardon Gary because the reason was what? What was the reason?
He said he spent too much time in jail
Yeah.
for a convicted rapist.
For a convicted rapist. I don't think the public would go along with that. Would you?
No.
I mean, if the governor doesn't believe this man is innocent, if the governor really believes that Gary Dotson raped this woman, and that she's now lying for whatever reason to get him free, would you agree that he should go loose? Should go free?
No, definitely not.
Yeah. Somehow I don't...
You know, I agree. If somebody raped my daughter, I'd want to see that guy strung up.
Yeah.
Boy, that's got to raise some hackles out there in the public to hear you say that, and yet somehow, Kathleen, you were able to put this man behind bars. It was your testimony that did it.
Yes, I did. And I'm certainly glad now that there wasn't a death penalty for him then, because there would have been no way to get him out. But, you know, you think about it, when it happens to your own daughter or to you or to somebody you know, when a real rape happens, you want to see that person put away. But to Gary, it didn't happen, and now I want to see him out.
Let's fill in the details, a little background. I read the book last night and this morning, and to me, it answers a lot of questions. How could anybody do this to another human being? You did not live what I would call the ideal childhood. Would you fill us in? Let's start with your mother and father and the situation with them when you were a little girl.
Well, they were divorced when I was 3 1/2, and my mother was a schizophrenic. And my father couldn't take care of 3 children, and he got married again, and she didn't want us.
He was making good money in those days. You describe him as an executive living somewhere on the north side of Chicago, so this?
Well, at that time, it was on the south side of
South
Chicago,
side, okay.
which was a very good neighborhood at the time. And he gave me to an old friend of theirs. She was 76 at the time. He told me I was going for dinner, and I ended up staying 10 years. And they never told me when I was little that I wasn't going to go back to him. And I spent a long time waiting for him to come back.
You were tricked, in effect.
Well, you know, nobody wants to see a little 3 1/2-year-old have a temper tantrum because they find out that they're not going back with Daddy and Mommy. So.
This woman was, you called her Aunt, what was it?
Aunt Nellie.
Aunt Nellie was 74 when you...
She was 76.
76 when you went to her? When you went there?
Mm-hmm.
She lived to be, what, about it?
8 months.
During that time, it was about 10 years, I think, and suffice it to say that you didn't stay with her all the time. You went with her granddaughter sometimes because she was too ill to take care of you.
I didn't go with her granddaughter until 10 years after that. I went when I was 13 1/2. That's when I moved in with her granddaughter.
Yeah, but Aunt Nellie was pretty good to you.
At first, yeah.
But she was quite strict.
She was strict, yeah, but there's nothing wrong with that. As I got older and she got older, she started to suffer senility, and also from many physical ailments, which a young child can't deal with.
Yeah. And during that time, if I read correctly, she reminded you quite frequently that nobody else wanted you. That's why you're there.
Yeah, I had an intense fear of the state taking me, and I was told that I was a ward of the state, and that if I wasn't good, they were going to come get me, and I was going to be bopped from detention home to detention home and things like that.
Let's jump ahead. People may have questions later on. I think that gives a fairly good profile of your background, although there's a lot more to it. It's in the book, forgive me. By the way, I don't mind promoting this book because the proceeds are going to Gary Dotson, and if he is innocent and spent, what, 6 years?
He spent 6 years behind
6
bars.
years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit. I would hope that the book does well. You decided you were going out and you had found out that you could get attention from boys by being friendly.
Yeah.
That's what got you into trouble?
Well, I became sexually promiscuous, and that was the whole reason why I invented the rape. Was when I got into a sexual affair, I needed an excuse. I thought I was pregnant.
When you say you had become sexually promiscuous, why then, and we'll have to say this, we're gonna take a break, we'll come back next segment and continue the story behind the rape charge itself. I'm wondering why then did you claim that you were raped in this one incident fearing, you said, that you were pregnant. Did you mean by being sexually promiscuous that you had had intercourse before?
Well, when I started being sexually promiscuous, you know, it starts out with making out type thing, and it evolves. By the time I was 16, it evolved into a sexual intercourse. But that one time that I was with that boy, he completed the act. And from that, I felt that I was pregnant. Immediately, I thought, I'm pregnant.
And that hadn't happened before?
No.
Okay. More with the Kathleen Crowell, on the Kathleen Crowell story when we come back. A lot of questions remain in the Kathleen Crowell web story. One that grabs me. How is this going to affect future rape cases? Is it going to color, poison the atmosphere? Women in the future cry rape, and will this case be cited as an example of how easy it is for someone to lie and put a man behind bars? That's one thing. If Gary Dotson served 6 years in jail with, falsely accused, how should he be compensated? She is donating, not donating. How do you call it? How do you explain it, Kathy? You're giving the proceeds of your book.
No, I don't feel like I'm donating it. I just feel like it's his. Before I signed the book contract, if I sign this contract, the money's going to him. That's
You're
how I
taking
felt.
nothing out except enough to pay taxes on
Just
the
the
profits.
taxes, yeah.
Movie rights?
Did the same way.
You've sold the rights to your story?
Yeah, I agreed to sign a contract the same contract that Gary had signed.
Okay.
With the same people.
Having dispensed with that notion that she may be making a fortune on this, the money's going to Gary Dodson, the book and the movie. Let's go back to the original story, or the incident that led to this charge. You thought you were pregnant because you had had sex with a boyfriend. First time you had actually completed the sex act, which doesn't come across in your story. It sounds to me like, gee, this young lady was promiscuous from the time she was 10, 11, 12. That's not true? Or was having sex from 10, 11, 12?
The governor asked me the same question. What do you mean by promiscuous? Well, when I think of promiscuous, I think of everything from making out all the way to the end. Some people think it's only the act of sexual intercourse. So you have to kind of define that for me.
Well, your book is kind of misleading because you say when you pull up to this kid on the street, when you're riding down the street and you invited this kid to come to your house. This is the kid you're talking about, David? Yeah. You said that I had been intimate with him before, but you didn't mean that you had completed the sex act.
Right. He hadn't ejaculated inside me, is what I'm saying.
Okay, and this night he did?
Yes.
You're panicked, and you decide, you fabricate this story. Well, tell us the story. What did you do there?
Well, I don't think I fabricated it right away, but through the night, my panic started to build, and by the next day, I had come up with this idea out of my head that the only thing I could think of to create, if there was going to be a pregnancy, to create a story that would not be my fault was a rape.
How'd you pull it off?
I really don't know to this day. A lot of really bad coincidences came together. I did not want to be found by the police, and they picked me up off the street on my way home.
Yeah, you intended to fake the rape, go home and tell your foster parents at the time that you had been raped to give you an excuse for getting pregnant. I mean, if in fact you turned out to be pregnant. But you hadn't intended to tell the police to create a legal case here.
No, I had nobody in mind to be the accused or anything.
But you're walking home and the police see you disheveled, clothes torn and all?
Yeah, I was crying when they picked me, when they found me. I had an apron on, wrapped around my clothing, so I wasn't naked, but I was just really upset because of what I was doing.
Tell us what you did to make it look like you had been raped.
I tore my clothing. I bruised very easily, so I bruised myself. I scratched my abdomen with a piece of glass.
Smeared your face. Your hands were dirty. You said.
I don't think I had to smear my face because I was crying and I had just gotten off work at a fish fry shop, so I probably looked real greasy and like that.
So when they took you in, did you tell them you didn't want to press charges?
No, I was like, I can't believe this is happening type. That's what I felt like that night.
The train's in motion, you're on it, you got to ride it now.
Yeah, it was like, to me, whenever I lied, I had to keep going with the lie. I would never admit my lie when I was a teenager.
How did Gary Dodson get involved in this?
They had me make up a police artist sketch. And
describe the guy who attacked.
Describe the guy. And in the story, I said there were 3 guys, but that I could only describe one of them. And he matched the description, the photo of a guy in a mug book that I had already looked through. And I was looking through the mug book saying, no, no, no. And a a policeman from Country Club Hills near there where he lived picked it out of a mug book and said, hey, this is Gary Dotson. And then they brought a handful of photos that I had already looked at to my house. And out of that, I looked and said, no. They handed him back and said, look again. And I saw that that picture looked very much like the sketch.
At that point, you couldn't say, no, that's not him, because the picture looks so much like him. And the pictures are in this book. Picture of Gary Dotson, 1977, with long hair and all, and the man that you had fictitiously described, it looks like it's a sketch of the man sitting there.
And at the time, the prosecution didn't think it looked like him.
Yeah.
I found out later, but I thought it did.
So in comes Gary Dotson for a lineup, and then you had to pick him out of the lineup, didn't you?
Right, because I guess at the time, the way they handed me the mugs, it's not real kosher. And I knew, it was like if I said, no, that's not him, I'd be lying, because he looked so much like the sketch. I thought, I'm going to be found out on my lie. And I just kept hoping, this guy's got to have an alibi.
At what point did it enter your mind that when you finger this fella, he's going to go to prison or could go to prison?
You know, it didn't until I really never thought he was going to be convicted until he was.
Okay. We got a couple questions from the audience.
The first time I heard or read of this incident, I was completely puzzled as to how she could concoct a story like that if the man didn't exist.
Are you saying you believe that she told the truth the first time around?
That's what I had a firm belief, and there's been nothing that I've come across yet to change my mind.
She's afraid of getting pregnant, afraid her foster parents will discover that, that she will and be humiliated, so she says, I got to come up with a story.
Yeah, but it doesn't justify just what happened.
No, I'm not saying it justifies it. You were saying you don't understand how she made up the story, and you're saying it just came to you and it kept growing, right?
Well, the book, for instance, goes into that in depth. At the time, I didn't realize it, but subconsciously, I was having these things fed into my mind. I was reading romance novels that had oodles and oodles of vicious rapes in them. And I was reading them because I liked the culture of the 17th and 18th century, and subconsciously I was picking up all this stuff. The author of this book and some other newspaper investigators read these books a couple months ago, and there were whole lines of quotes taken out of those books that were in the testimony in 1979. I never knew that.
So that's the source of her perspective on this rape, I guess.
I understand now, but I wonder if she ever realized that some of these fellas that are doing time for rape get raped in jail. That happens in prison.
I'm not sure what that has to... Are you saying, did she think that far ahead? Obviously, no. She was just looking for a way out of her dilemma. Correct, Kathy?
At the time, yes.
Yeah. But when you realize... Well, let's go to the trial. You go to the trial, you thought you were going to be discovered at any moment, revealed. I remember one point in the book when you're describing what happened to you, you said, then the car pulled over onto the gravel and you realized, uh-oh, there was no gravel there. She thought that the jury would hear this, the judge, and certainly the defense attorney. Didn't the defense attorney pick up on that at all?
No, unfortunately, Gary got his attorney 48 hours before the trial. So the defense attorney didn't have any background.
Now, reading through the book, there were other inconsistencies in the trial, inconsistencies in your testimony that nobody picked up.
Well, some people picked him up and ignored them.
Like?
Well, his mustache. He had a full-grown mustache at the time he was picked up. I was very adamant in insisting that the man had no mustache because I found out, like, the day they picked Gary Dotson up, that he had a mustache. They said to me, well, the guy's got a mustache, but maybe he could have grown it.
In one day?
And they wanted to know, are you sure he didn't have a mustache? And I said, no, he didn't have a mustache. And I was adamant about it. Well, he had a full-grown mustache for, since he was 14, and he was 19 when he was picked up.
Were you incredulous that they pursued this conviction, that the steamroller kept moving toward this man's conviction in spite of these inconsistencies, or what?
Well, they very much wanted to catch the man that they thought had raped me, and you can't blame the police for that. We certainly would want that for anybody that we knew that was raped, that they, went full tilt to get the man. But I felt like, how come you guys are so on the job, like go find something else. But I lived in a town that this had been the first rape, and they were right on the case.
You have said, you've since learned, that there are many people charged unjustly or inaccurately or falsely with rape. You learned that after the fact. In the Appendix B of your book here, you quote a man see if I can find it very quickly. Well, tell us, it's Mr. McDowell. Who is he? Charles P. McDowell?
He is he works for the Air Force, although he's a civil. And he is the foremost rape expert in the United States, and he's just created a rape model for police experts and the Air Force to determine rapes, to notice them, you know, see them right away, and also to pick out which ones are false and which ones are true. I was really surprised a couple months ago when I saw the percentage of false rapes.
What percentage is that?
Well, it was like 482 to 1,300 were false.
482?
I believe that's the number, but, you
Of
know, it's right in
1,300
there.
investigated?
Of 1,300 that he cited.
Yeah. Makes people
false.
wonder. Did the criminal justice system in this country let Gary Dotson down? You say you believe her now, but what do you think about the criminal justice system?
Terrible.
Yeah. I wonder how much confidence we can have in the system, and I think that I'm sure that's what's bothering the judge in this case, and the jury, and everyone else, the governor of Illinois. When we come back, when we find out that someone has been imprisoned unjustly, without cause, I think it shakes our faith in the criminal justice system a little bit. We are joined right now by a criminal attorney.
Correct.
Criminal attorney, okay. Gerald Ulch has a private practice right here in Boston. And my notes say here, like many other attorneys, has some questions and reservations concerning Kathy's case. Before you give me those, let me give you a couple questions. One,
Sure.
Do you think it's as easy to get someone convicted on a rape charge as Kathy just suggested to us?
Yes, I do. We learned in law school that the crime of rape is an easy crime to accuse someone of and very difficult to disprove. And in my practice of criminal law, which I have been involved in for 28 years, I've come to realize that that's true. It carries with it a stigma. That's why I look upon this incident involving Kathy as a potentially good thing. If there are any other women in Kathy's position, that is, a woman who has made false accusations against a man, resulting in that man's conviction, whether it be of rape or aggravated assault or any similar type of offense, I would hope that they would be encouraged to come forward as she has.
We need to talk about what it was finally that motivated you to come forward, Kathy, but let me hold that for a minute. I want to ask Gerald Ulch what you would have done, how you would have treated the case differently had you been the defense attorney. Did Gary Dotson's defense attorney do a good job?
I can't and won't answer that specifically, and I'll tell you why, Buzz. How often it is that I pick up a newspaper and read of someone having been convicted in a notorious case, and lawyers around the Boston area have been asked to second guess and give their opinions, and they give it. I don't believe in that. The only way an attorney can professionally and responsibly give an opinion as to what he would have done specifically at a trial is if one of two things had occurred. He should have been there, either participating in the trial or been in court every day and been privy to the evidence, not just read it in the newspaper, or at the very least have read the trial transcript. Now, I've done neither. All I know is what I've read in the papers, and I read Kathy's book yesterday from cover to cover. I will, however, answer your question in a general way. And this answer that I'm about to give you, ladies and gentlemen, is in some way, I shouldn't say in some way, it's completely based upon my faith in the criminal justice system, this miscarriage of justice notwithstanding. I believe that a criminal attorney worth his salt, and I put myself in that category, when faced with the task of cross-examining a principal witness, as Kathy was in her first trial, a principal witness who is in fact lying under oath, that criminal attorney must be able to break her down and destroy her credibility before the jury. If he can't do that, and I include myself in this, he should turn in his ticket.
Well, let's take the one instance that I cited already. She's talking on the stand, right? And she mentions that they pulled over to the side and she knew they were pulling off because she heard the gravel. Any competent investigator, having been given the location where she was dropped off, could find there are no dirt roads, there are no gravel roads around there.
I'll answer that with a question, if I may, to Kathy. Kathy, was that brought out by Gary Dotson's defense attorney at the trial?
No, nothing of that sort was.
And she was sure she was going to be exposed at that point. Oh, my God, I said that, and
Right.
that can't be confirmed.
Now combine, ladies and gentlemen, what she just said with something else that she said in the last segment, and that is, if I heard you correctly, Kathy, that Dotson's attorney was hired 48 hours before the trial. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Anytime an attorney is hired to represent a criminal defendant in a serious case, such as a crime or the accusation of rape, I know of no instance, except apparently this case, where a judge has forced that lawyer to go to trial with 48 hours preparation unless the attorney simply didn't make a request for a continuance. I don't know whether he did or he didn't.
He
Did
was a public defender,
Yeah.
and I don't know anything about that.
They're overworked, to be sure, public defenders are. Often they get handed a case that they're about to defend a defendant on their way to the courthouse. That's no excuse. That's a condemnation of the criminal justice system.
Well, just the fact that the man could not afford to hire a top-notch attorney would put some people off, including myself. In this country, it does seem, if you're Klaus von Bülow, and I think he cited Klaus von Bülow, but if you're Klaus von Bülow, you got a much better chance of getting off than if you're Gary Dotson.
Unfortunately, you're right.
Or getting justice, let's say.
You are
Okay.
unfortunately correct.
We've got a phone call, then I'm going to open it up to questions from the audience right after that. Go ahead, John. People are talking.
Yes. Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. All I'd like to say is that if I was Gary Dotson, there would be no way that I could forgive you, Kathleen. And I think you're going off a little bit. I think you should be not condemning the criminal justice system, but condemning people like Kathy. What right does she have to go and, put that man behind bars? That's not even fair.
Yeah, I'd either bet to condemn the criminal justice system, maybe to raise some questions, nor to praise Kathy. I think that it took a lot of courage for her to finally come out and reverse herself, but I also think what she did was a very despicable act. And I said earlier that had I been Gary Dotson, I don't know if I'd have the strength to forgive her. You asked a question earlier that pertained to that.
Was there a fine for perjury?
Yes, just 5 years in a penitentiary, 5 years maximum.
Was there a fine given to you?
No, because they say that I didn't commit perjury in 1979, and they say that they don't know if I committed perjury in 1985.
Because they don't believe that she's now telling the truth.
They can't prove that I'm not telling the truth now.
Yeah. Let me move around here. We had a question on the outside over here. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just had a question as to the character of Gary Dotson. I can understand the police department's eagerness to put him behind bars, given the fact that it was a small town and they wanted to solve this crime. But why the stiff sentence, and what was his background?
Okay, well, the reason he was given a stiff sentence is because it was aggravated rape and kidnapping. And he was convicted of a crime that happened in 1977. In Illinois, they changed the laws in 1978 and made them less stiff. He was convicted under old laws. That if anybody else had been convicted prior to 1977, they would have received the same type of penalty. His background was a typical juvenile delinquent.
Okay. Satisfactory?
Yes, sir.
One more question back here.
What kind of compensation is there now for Gary? What does he put on his resume? What do you envision for his future?
Well, right now he's being apprenticed as a carpenter, which he loves to do. He's going to get married in May, which I'm glad to hear. The financial compensation that I can give him comes from the book and if there's a movie made. I would like to also compensate his mother because she had to pay dearly for him. And the other compensation for his name, I think, is the most important. That's why I'm here. That's why the book was written. And so people can see that he's innocent. He likes to walk down the street, and he's scared because he sees people looking at him as the rapist still. I'd like to see the Illinois judicial system or the federal government wipe that off his record.
Nobody has raised this question. I want to come back to it after this break, but nobody's asked about her motivation in reversing herself. Now, we've talked about her motivation in crying rape, but no one about why she reversed herself. What do you think motivated her to finally talk?
I did not read her book, but she
I'm glad, just based on what you know. What do you think?
Because she said she was a born-again Christian, and that directed her. After she did become this born-again Christian, how long did it take you, to come forward?
Now you're getting into my question. I'm glad you asked that. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. Who was the first person to whom she confessed besides God? Green Crow Webb, why after so many years did you finally decide to tell the truth that Gary Dotson did not rape you? And let me summarize. We all have read the story. He was convicted. You were told he was going off to prison. You felt badly, but you went off and got married, went to New Hampshire, and for years you really just couldn't sleep well. You became a born-again Christian, and would you pick it up from there?
I have to go back a little ways.
Okay.
After I got convicted, I just pushed him out of my mind because I wanted to be able to live. And I could live with myself because I didn't have a conscience. I was very self-centered. After I became a born-again Christian, it's when my conscience developed. It's when I became alive. And that's when I started to have trouble sleeping, when God really convicted me. And it took 3.5 years of learning to trust God and growing in faith, knowing that whatever was going to happen, He was going to take care of me. You see, I didn't want to be thrown in prison, which I knew was going to happen, when I had little children and I had a husband who loved me dearly.
For those who don't believe that her recantation is valid, who believe that she was telling the truth the first time, ask yourselves now, I had to ask myself this question, why? No profit. Proceeds from the book go to Gary Dotson. Proceeds from the movie go to Gary Dotson. Fame?
Infamy.
Would you, what?
Infamy, not fame.
Infamy, okay. Well, yeah, notoriety. Let's list the negatives. What kind of fears went through your mind? What'll happen to me if I come out and say I lied? What were the potential repercussions at that time?
Well, the number one fear was that my husband was going to leave me and take my children with. It still amazes me when I look at him how much he loves me, that he stayed. And next, that I would be put in jail, civil lawsuits. You know, he could have sued me till the kingdom come, and my children.
Let me ask this gentleman back here. He still doesn't believe you. Why would she do that? Why would she take that risk?
I can't understand that myself. The thing that gets me completely, though, is how, with the circumstances, like the mustache, for example, she could have recanted her testimony then.
Then she would have to admit that she was lying.
Yes, exactly.
On the stand.
Yes, she
and
would
she was afraid of being
what,
discovered.
What in the world kind of a lawyer did she have to let her tell that kind of a story?
Did your lawyer know that you were not telling the truth?
I didn't have a lawyer, per se. The prosecution is the one that prosecutes the case. And they're the ones that you talk to. They knew that Gary, well, I shouldn't say they knew. The police knew that Gary had a mustache since he was 14.
Buzz, if I may, when I read the book yesterday, there was a portion of the book that set forth a rather brief excerpt of Kathy's examination testimony in court. And although it was only 2 pages long, the thing that really came out and hit me was the detail of the alleged attack by Dotson as testified to by Gary. And if I may, I'd like to ask Kathy a question. Kathy, when you were being interviewed by the police, did the police or any other law enforcement authorities help you along or coach you or encourage you to come up with this very detailed description of this alleged rape?
That's a difficult question to answer, but yes, I believe that they did. And I think partially because they were anxious to get a conviction. They were anxious to not necessarily get a conviction, but find the guy. But I felt at the time, the more detail I gave, the harder it was going to be to find a man also. As far as when I finally picked out the man, I was helped with that.
You were trying to be so specific that they couldn't find anybody to match up to every little detail, but it looked like from the drawing that they had come up with that person. He's in prison now. You're living in New Hampshire with your husband and 2 kids. You're a born-again Christian, and you decide you've got to confess. To whom did you first admit that you were telling a lie?
Bonnie Nanini, she's my pastor's wife, and she's a very good friend of mine.
Why her?
Because I didn't have enough guts to tell my husband first. And I knew that I had enough strength and courage to tell somebody, and I prayed and said, Lord, you know, I knew she was going out that night, and I said, Lord, if she'd just come over here, I think I could tell her. And the phone rang, and it was her, and she asked me if she could come over, because I'd been talking to her about restitution that morning, but she knew nothing about what it was about.
Reading your book, that really influenced me greatly. The conversation you had with her and the emotional state that you were in when you called her, if I were on the other end of that line, I would have believed you were telling the truth. Was that ever confirmed in a court of law? Was she called in to testify in the hearing as to whether there should be a new trial?
No, when I talked to her on the phone, we were talking about restitution in general. When she came over that night, that's when I told her, when I recanted to her, and she was never brought in to testify.
That was the most convincing passage. I think that the public, that should have been a part of the public record somehow, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah, well, another, I don't know what you'd call that.
Had you not become a born-again Christian, would you still come out and admit that he wasn't guilty?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
So you think it's your religion that made you?
I think it's my faith. See, religion is something that you put on and take off. But faith is something that you gain, that you accept when you accept Christ as your Savior. You gain faith and you grow in faith. And not only did I need a conscience, because I didn't have one before, but I also needed strength and courage, which I can only get from the Lord.
You can only imagine how tough she had grown as an individual, I think, when you read her story and understand what she went through. And since I grew up in a situation where there were a lot of rough family situations, I can understand that, and I lived part of it myself. You have to get tough to survive sometimes. And you, at that point, have become tough enough to care only about Kathy and your survival. Right. Okay. Thank you for waiting. Go ahead. Young people are talking.
Hi. I was reading the other day where Gary doesn't want any proceeds from the book.
He doesn't want any profits or publicity from the book?
No.
Okay. What about that, Kath?
He accepted the advance royalties, and I don't believe that that's a correct quote. He has never asked for them, but he says, Kathy, you know, I spent 6 years in jail. I want to start. That's all I want is a start. And he's accepted them.
He hasn't asked you for any money, but he hasn't rejected your offers. No. But he did suggest that you take some money, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He wants me to pay my legal fees, but I already decided when I signed the book contract that all the money would go to Gary.
Okay. We've got more questions on the Kathy. Okay, Kathleen Crowell, we're going to continue with your story. We've got questions here in the audience, but Gerald Alch, I want to make sure that you understand one thing. Jump in here anywhere. You're the attorney. You're the legal mind here. You're our expert for today, so please feel free to respond to these questions also.
Yes, I'd like to know what Gary's alibi was the night of the alleged crime.
What was Gary's alibi?
Why it didn't hold up.
He had 5 alibi witnesses. There were 2 other people in a car with him. He was 20 minutes away from the alleged scene of the attack when it was supposed to have occurred, in heavy city traffic, with 3 other people. And then later, he, you know, at 8:30, when I was supposedly got off work and was picked up, he was 20 minutes away in heavy traffic at a house with like 5 other people. Then he left with 2 of those people and went to parties and was with those 2 people till 1 o'clock in the morning when he was dropped off at home to his mother's house.
They all testified to that effect. The jury rejected their testimony.
In fact,
Gerald, go ahead.
You see, that's part of the tragedy of this case. Naturally, the real tragedy is what happened to Gary Dotson. Part of that tragedy is that the legal system, our criminal justice system, let him down. I mean, as these things are pointed out, his alibi witnesses, the false forensic testimony that was presented, it's a case that cries out for being righted. And what's frustrating is, according to the book, the very last legal step taken by Dotson still hasn't gotten him any relief. And I believe, I may be naive, that there must be some way in this system to right the wrong. The system fell down in Gary Dotson's case.
We'll come back to the outlook for Gary Dotson, but we've got a few more questions on here first. Go ahead. You had a comment?
I'm a born-again Christian, and I haven't really followed the case closely, and I've tended to believe you, but I have trouble understanding the lack of conscience to the extent of just being able to continue on your daily way with just no thought.
Do you think she's continuing on her daily way?
Oh, no, I don't mean now. I mean before she came up with all this.
Yeah.
The period of time that lapsed
between becoming a Christian, and going forward?
Yes.
Well, I didn't really lead my daily life. You know, I was kind of a closet crazy. I mean, when the kids were home with just me, I'd be crying in the middle of the day.
No, I don't think that's what you meant. I think you meant before she became a born-again Christian. Yeah, the years that you spent free while he's and enjoying your family while he's in prison. She can't understand how you could be so. And you said you didn't have a conscience.
Well, I think not everybody's like that, but those who are or were would understand that. It's just hard to explain. Why do people murder without any conscience?
People say you sit here, you look so sweet and nice and honest, and they can't imagine you doing that. Really, I've heard that in the audience a couple times. Go ahead.
What bothers me is this young man that actually penetrated you, that you had intercourse with. Where was he? Why didn't he step forward? I mean, didn't he think something was up when you made up this big story, and he never put 2 and 2 together and said, hey, Kathy, what are you doing?
Okay, on the weekends, I used to go back to Beverly Hills, which is about 40 miles north of Homewood, and that's where I had the sexual relationship with this boy. The rape incident occurred in Homewood, and he didn't know anything about it. They're miles apart.
Oh, that was at your Aunt Nellie's place where you and the boy had the encounter. You staged the rape or faked the rape close to her granddaughter and her husband.
Right.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry, you had a follow-up question?
I just wondered what happened afterwards. Did he read? I mean,
Whatever
papers
happened
and
to
things?
what?
Well, there was only a little thing in the local papers.
Yeah.
So that never made the Chicago papers.
There was a great inconsistency, the critics say, in your testimony, too, saying that that you hadn't had intercourse with anyone, were not raped that day, yet there was a 7-inch or something like 11-inch semen stain on your panties. And I know this may be embarrassing, but how did you explain that?
Oh, that's very explainable. I'm glad you brought that up. The forensic testimony at the time of the trial was presented falsely. The forensic scientist perjured himself.
For what motive? I mean, why?
Well, I don't think he was prepared, and on a couple of things he knew what he was doing. The semen stain was not 7 inches or 13 inches, I can't remember which was, long. It was in spots.
Spotted.
It was dried, one on top of the other, which could not have happened unless it had been over 2 hours from the time I was picked up. I was picked up within 2 hours of what I said was the rape. That had to have happened at least 12 hours prior to me being picked up for that, the way that it was laid on the underwear. There was no semen found on my body at all. It was all on the underwear, dried. And as a matter of fact,
how did it get there?
Because I had had intercourse the night before with that boy.
That was
and
the night before.
Right.
Okay.
Also, the forensic testimony that the serologist presented at the first case said that he was only one of 10% that could have created that semen. And it was found out in March and April and May that he was one of 66% of the white Caucasians that could have created that, and David Burns was in that 66%.
You had a comment or question, I think, but I'm going to have to take a break and come back. When I have to ask her questions like this, how did it get there, I feel a slight pain in my stomach for what she's going through. And for the life of me, I can't imagine her putting herself through this. No profit from the book, no profit from the movie. Is there profit hidden someplace along here? I mean, Kathy, what?
Free conscience, you know, I'm free of the guilt now. I mean, I have remorse, but at least he's out and I'm trying to do something.
Ask yourselves, those of you who still doubt, at least I had to ask myself, would you go through this just for the sake of clearing this guy or clearing your name? Tomorrow, let's take care of tomorrow's show business first. Tomorrow we're going to have a program featuring Siamese twins connected at the head. They have been that way for 36 years. There they are on your screen right now. And they are so compatible and so much in unison that they say if medical science can separate them today, no thanks. They'd like to stay just the way they are. So it was a show that I was a little bit concerned about doing, but they won my heart, and it's taped tomorrow. There'll be no live audience tomorrow. We taped the show last week, so don't bother coming out, but watch. It's going to be a good show. Interesting show. There's a point to be made, too, a useful point. Kathleen, we got more questions down here. I told this lady here that I'd give her a chance.
Yeah, I was wondering why you waited the whole 6 years. I know you want. I think you're doing it because you want to free yourself, in a way.
So why not earlier?
Yeah, why not earlier? I know you want to free yourself. I wouldn't be. How could anybody live with that all those years? But why did you wait and let him stay there?
Do you know what it means to be born again? Because that question keeps coming up, Kathy.
No,
I think that when people keep asking that question, they're maybe not hearing you.
Well, I know a born-again Christian, but I happen to be Catholic. But that has nothing to do with it.
But it did have everything to do with
it. Religion, I don't think it has anything to do with it, really. Any one religion. Religion is religion to me, whether it's Catholic, Jewish,
Kathy,
whatever.
once and for all, why did you wait so long?
Okay, well, for the first 2.5, I wasn't a Christian, and I was very self-centered. Then I became a Christian, and then my conscience was awakened. I had God's conscience. And he doesn't believe in lying. He's the father of truth.
Can I jump ahead? You found religion and you confessed, but there's a lady back here who has the quintessential question, I think. Where do we go? What was your question earlier?
Well, I think it was that she has really set a precedent. Now, why couldn't some other person do the same thing that you did, perjure themselves, actually, and then 2 or 3 years recant the story, and then the person would go free again, and the person that committed perjury would also go free.
But you know, that question has come up, and we got just about 30 seconds here, but you said, where do we go from here? Is there going to be any final confirmation of what really happened in a court of law?
If he is declared innocent, I would be up for perjury charges. And where I live in the state of New Hampshire, so I have no immunity. If I had lived in the state of Illinois for over 7 years, I would not now be immune to perjury. I knew when I came forward that I would not be immune to perjury. I can still be charged with perjury.
Thank you for coming forward, Gerald Dodds. Thanks for joining us. We're fresh out of time. Thank you all for watching. Tomorrow, same time, same place. Would you express your appreciation? I haven't come out.